And the next area where we have to do something really important, because those economic changes are important. The issue of our children is important. The issue of race is important. The next two are really important. First, our environmental crisis. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a bigger crisis on our hands than just a climate crisis. Our entire ecosystem is imploding. It's not just the weather. It's the water. It's the food. It's the air. It's the soil. You know, there are contaminants in the drinking water of the United States that's so great that our EPA only regulates about 70 chemicals, but we have 125,000 chemicals that are actually in use in commerce. We have situations that are so great that here we are talking about how we're going to provide health care, but as you've probably heard me say before, the issue is not just that we need to figure out how we're going to pay for health care. What we need to be thinking about is, how come we're all so sick all the time? That's the real question. The question is not just how to pay for health care. The issue is for us to ask ourselves, why do we have so much more chronic illness than they do in other countries? And if we're going to look at that, we have to ask ourselves also about our food policies, also about our chemical policies, also about our water. On one hand, you could say this president, which he has gutted the Clean Water Act, gutted the Clean Air Act, rolled back the Obama-era rules against selling pesticides that we absolutely know harm a child's brain. But a lot of this was going on even before Trump. For instance, these contaminants and the fact that the EPA was not regulating them. And one of the reasons the EPA doesn't regulate them is not just because of Democrats or Republicans, but because the Office of Budget and Management is making these decisions where we spend our money. And one of the reasons that they don't have the EPA regulate more is because the U.S. government is one of the main polluters when you look at things like NASA and you look at things like the Department of Defense. This whole thing goes so deep. Among other things, ladies and gentlemen, some of the worst contaminants in our water, some of the worst poisons and toxins come from our hospitals, come from our hospices, which should have filters. Remediation and filters outside them, just like any polluting factory would have. These are the kinds of things that we do not pay for. Why? Well, when you're giving a $2 trillion tax cut to the very richest individuals, where you've got the 83 cents of every dollar are going to the richest people, we've had such a massive transfer of wealth into the hands of a very few people. And what has happened is what is happening. We should, of course, put back in those middle-class tax cuts. But until we realize the massive mobilization that is necessary here, it is bigger even than just the climate crisis as we know it. Of course, we need to join the Paris Peace Accords again, but that's almost like kindergarten at this point. We need to reverse climate change, not only with carbon sequestration, not only with reforestation, not only with the development of clean energy and clean, sustainable energy that will enable us to have different forms of transportation. Not only do we need to deal with these animal factory farmings and these CAFOs where there's so much nitrous oxide and so much methane, even if you did everything else, climate change would still be the terrible crisis that it is if we did not deal with the animal factory farming. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this kind of mobilization, in order for us to deal with the fact, what is happening to our planet is much like what would happen is your pancreas is sick, and your lungs are sick, and your heart is sick, and your abdomen is sick. This is an implosion that we are facing here. It is not just hurricanes. It is not just sea level. It is not just floods. It is something where we do not even know what the consequences will be if, in fact, all the systems reach a high level of stress and of challenge at the same time. The American people need to wake up. And we need to now know that all of us are ready. We're not leaving it to this government. We have become mentally trained to think they're going to do it. We all need to be involved in this, and we need to see the mobilization for the protection and the repair of our ecosystem as important, as significant, and as massive a mobilization as was World War II.